Greetings, brothers and sisters. So I have a bunch of stuff to get to about this particular, what do you call it, Mercury in retrograde. It's a brutal one. I'm experiencing it as a brutal one, and things just breaking down. Just, it's hard not to really dislike people or really, have a negative view of people in general. So I'll come around to that. But I got a few headlines that have to do with this. First, Joe Rogan savages CNN's Brian Stelza and his effing terrible show. And what he said, Joe Rogan, I had a problem with what he and Alex Jones did by trashing the truth community and implying that so many of us, or that many people in the so-called truth community, were schizophrenic or mentally ill. And it was pretty brutal them doing it, considering a large portion of both their audiences make up the people who are looking for alternative narratives to mainstream media. So I went after Joe Rogan pretty fiercely. He's not like a real truther. He's a mainstream guy, but he's more towards our side, like maybe someone like Tucker Carlson is, than he is towards totally mainstream. And this is what he had to say. So Brian Stelter complained that YouTube personalities are getting more viewers than CNN, as if it was some horrible thing. They were describing it as they're entitled to viewers, which we know. This is because the market has spoken and your show is effing terrible. These are things that I've been saying for a number of years now, even went farther in my videos. Brian Stelter's show keeps slipping and slipping and slipping in the ratings. Same with Don Lemon. It's the same thing. Everybody knows they're not real. They're not real humans. This is coming. If you've listened to my shows, I've said this over and over again. They're completely fake. How about Brian Stelter talking to the press secretary saying, "What are we doing wrong? What are we doing wrong?" Like, hey, MNFers, you're supposed to be a journalist. These are, again, it's always nice when you're agreed with, because this is all stuff I've been saying for a number of years. They're obviously being told a certain amount of what they do. No, it's all handed to them. It's all scripted. So this is stuff that, the lines are being drawn even for people like Joe Rogan, because they're trying to extinguish anybody who's outside the bandwidth. And now these guys are starting to feel heat, and they're starting to come to this realization that, me and other people have had for a number of years. So this is Jen Psaki. It's up to interpretation. But she, she's on with Brian Stelter. I think this is where it came from, this quote by Joe Rogan, this discussion between Brian Stelter and Jen Psaki.
Different areas of interest, so that's exactly what I try to do every day in the briefing room.
He said in his inaugural, we all have a duty to defend the truth and defeat the lies.
Defend the truth and defeat the lies. Coming from Joe Biden, a career liar. A politician is a career liar, right? Misrepresenter, false hope, saying one thing in terms of getting votes and to their constituents and acting and doing another. Their whole job is to lie, right? I think most people understand that about politicians.
5 months in, do you feel you've made any progress with that, defeating the lies?
I try every day to. And Brian, I think one of the things I try to focus on, or we all do in this administration, is not undervaluing the intelligence of the American people.
The American people listening to politicians, fake politicians, and fake news people are now rejecting that. That's why you guys are doing all this, trying to censor people and all the rest of it.
When people ask a question that is based on a false premise or a question that skips over some details, what we try to do on our best days is be informative. Explain how a process works. How does a bill become a law? What's the importance of communicating or going to the G7 or NATO? We don't need to completely...
Joe Biden is a lie. You're saying that Joe Biden is mentally competent and able to lead this country is a deception. You guys are all, coordinating with CNN and MSNBC and Hollywood and everybody else, when we know the guy is a babbling idiot, right?
Dumb things down. We need to speak about things in an accessible way, but we have a responsibility to peel the curtains back in governing and government and how things work. And, we think the American people will hopefully respond to that. What our assessment is of our success, I will tell you, I never thought we would be successful in rebuilding every element of trust with the public in 5.
The trust is over. I'm going to come back to this a couple of times, but that's the problem. There's no trust anymore. It's not because of Trump. It's because of you guys and what happened,
5 months. It's going to be an ongoing process and something we'll keep working on every day.
Then she went on to say this.
We have a responsibility not to allow the briefing room to become a forum for propaganda or a forum for pushing forward falsehoods or inaccurate information. My best preparation from that was actually serving as the State Department's.
It is propaganda. Like, propaganda doesn't come from people, individual people like me, right? Propaganda, individual people can repeat propaganda. Propaganda has to come from a powerful organization, and usually it comes from governments. Governments run on propaganda.
Spokesperson when there were representatives of the Russian and Chinese media in the briefing room asking me questions that were directed by their government. So we see.
Yeah, good thing CNN is independent, right?
See that from time to time in the briefing room, not every single day at all, but I have a responsibility to the public to make sure they're getting accurate information, and the premises of questions that are propaganda pushing are not giving them inaccurate information.
Wow, it's just they come out here and, it's just hard to watch. They just, this deception. Joe Biden is not a mentally competent person, right? He's not somebody you'd say, oh, he's good at being president, because he's not. Like, that in itself, their CNN, the Hollywood, and all these people are, they're living a lie, because Joe Biden is obviously somebody struggling mentally, and he's not up to this really hard job of president. And so even being a mouthpiece and an actor who doesn't know anything goes out there, he can't even pull it off. And so this whole thing is a lie, his whole presidency, and she's a part of it. Like, you can't even, get into all the other details unless you, establish the guy isn't mentally competent and whatever, he's just somebody who's been a career-long deceiver. Politicians are deceivers, right? They spend all their time lying to their constituents, the American people, the people that voted for them, and then doing other things, right, with hidden agendas, disinformation.
And speaking of inaccurate information, you were asked on Friday at the briefing about Facebook and about the ban against former President Trump that's in effect now for almost 2 more years. You said the Biden White House wants the platforms to crack down on disinformation.
So you have a president cracking down on what they call disinformation. And what they're saying is, people like me, independent people, voicing their opinions, people who don't agree with the mainstream narrative, that's all disinformation. But it's what I believe. It's not disinformation in the sense that, disinformation is when you know the truth and you purposely twist the truth. From the Heartfulness Meditation, Whispers from the Brighter World, obscurantism, right? It is where a powerful entity purposely lies to the people that they control, the people that they're supposed to govern, whatever it might be. And so obscurantism is what happens all the time. From the people that run the system, they know the truth, and they either withhold it from you, or they give you the truth in a way it's mixed with lies or just out and out lies and deceptions. And that's what they do. And so when he says crack down on disinformation, what that means is crack down on dissenting opinions. And he was just talking about how Putin does that and Russia does that, and that's a part of the lie, because they're literally pushing private companies to crack down on more truthful information that exposes the lies of these clowns, media and government, who are working together to lie and deceive the American people, and are complaining about it because American people are tired of it and aren't tuning into it.
But what does it actually mean in practice? What do you envision that looking like?
Look, there are a range of ways to do that, Brian, including, these platforms, how they attract users, how they're tracking the information that is going out there to the public. Certainly, it's a
tracking information. They want you to track the information and send it to the government and work in coordination with the government to keep tabs on you for verbalizing your dissent. And he's complaining about Russia and other countries not being free and not, he was talking about human rights. This is, him violating the capitalist system of these so-called private companies that are, here to serve people as platforms for them to verbalize their opinions and develop their critical thinking skills. And they want to use it to spy, which they are, and to suppress, which they are, and ultimately deplatform people.
A decision by them who is allowed to use their platforms. As I also said on Friday, we know a lot about former President Trump and how he uses these platforms, and it feels pretty unlikely he's going to massively change his approach over the next 2 years.
So what? So you're saying, that he should be deplatformed forever? Look, why can't you compete with him? Like, just on a fair playing field. You couldn't. Like, they had to hide JoJo away. I mean, they had to use, devious means to defeat Trump because they couldn't compete with him. Why can't you? Like, Trump is not like some brilliant, there's people on the right, Trumpers, that love him, but it isn't like he's, not a guy with a lot of baggage and a lot of issues. And, he's a flim-flam man, and they couldn't compete with him. Like, it wasn't like Trump. Trump already has a lot of people that dislike him just on principle. And so, you couldn't win over some independents and other people in an even fight where Joe Biden is out there campaigning and, Joe Biden couldn't get anybody at his rallies. Like, why is Trump so much more popular than Biden?
I guess we'll see. But there's a lot of ways that these platforms can take initiative, can take steps themselves to ensure that the American public is not getting, or the global public, to be honest, is not getting inaccurate information.
For other PR professionals who watch what you do, for journalists who watch what you do, what's your advice for them about trying to stay close to the truth in this world of lies?
Stay close to the truth in this world of lies. What is he? Human beings lie. That's an unfortunate thing. We have the ability to lie. We have the ability to lie in various ways. There should be more words than just lie. Like, there's all these various ways that lying takes place. But the liars, the biggest liars, are government and media right now, and corporations and the people who control the system. And to say they're trying to stick with the truth in a world full of lies, like the rest of us independent people, we're all, lying in ways that is so destructive to everybody else. But these guys are the arbiters of the truth.
Well, I think what I try to do is stay grounded to the facts, and what I mean by that, the details. And
those are the details that the government says are the official story, coming from, the government, coming from the corporate influences, coming from the intelligence community, which is an agency built on lying. These spy agencies, they're built on covert action and lying to their own people, deception, psychological operations, psychological programming, all these things. They've spent a lot of money developing techniques to lie and manipulate people. And these guys have lost, people don't trust the government and the media anymore. And they make it sound, and I want to talk about this when I do the voiceover part of this video, but I want to repeat this. They make it sound like it's our fault that they are, we see them as the liars that they are.
What we can help provide publicly to clarify context, to make it more understandable to the press, to the public, and sometimes it's not more complicated than that. Really talking to policy experts and gaining an understanding myself so that I can communicate in a way that my mother, my mother-in-law.
See, we no longer view the world through the politics that these guys are pushing. Like, people are, becoming more simple in their views and don't want these complex political explanations for why they do the things the way they do them.
Other people who are not involved in politics like you and I are every day would understand what we're trying to do. I keep grounded in that, but try to go deep in the details so I can kind of pull out and make it accessible.
So I searched January 6th on YouTube just to understand how their algorithms work. And if you see, it starts here with PBS, PBS here, 8 more. These are, I guess, for PBS. And this has to do with the, this is CNBC, PBS NewsHour, MSNBC, PBS. And then you get into some local stations and things like this. And then down here, this is the Capitol Hill riots, MSNBC, Washington Post, CNN. Tucker Carlson promotes conspiracy theory about FBI planned riot. And there's more about that, right? And you see that it's all mainstream media. This is a local news station, MSNBC, Reuters, right? Reuters, Politico. So these are all mainstream organizations because YouTube changed their policies about, I don't know how long, 2 years ago, leading up to this election, where they said that they wanted just what they called authoritative news. So their algorithms, when you search for truther stuff, when you as a person who's searching for something other than MSNBC and CNN and Fox, I mean, sometimes they put Fox, but even less so. And so when you're searching for something other than what they're giving you here, and their algorithm says, no, you don't want to watch this, you want to watch this, right? You want to watch mainstream media, even though you're searching for alternative opinions, it's giving people like Brian Stelter an edge. Like he's got an edge now, a significant edge on YouTube, where his videos and CNN's videos are going to be recommended. MSNBC and these other organizations are going to be recommended much more than your videos, right? So what you have is independent people, right? Independent, someone like me who is just verbalizing their opinions on things, right? And their own research and things that they're, using their critical thinking skills. And maybe you might be wrong at times. Maybe you claim things are factual and they're speculative. Maybe you repeat something that's, dishonest or disinformation. But at least you believe in what you're putting out there. Like that's the difference between mainstream media, which may believe what they're putting out there, but they, on some level, they have to know that it's lies or they're not journalists. But anyways, they work for media organizations that have a very narrow bandwidth, and they put out sucky content, and they're losing big time, even with this unfair advantage of YouTube and Facebook giving preference to these organizations that aren't YouTubers, right? These aren't what YouTube was supposed to be about. YouTube isn't ThemTube. It isn't, I said this like 4 years ago. YouTube is individual people. It's not powerful organizations, especially news media. They have their own platforms. Like you can go to cable news right now and YouTube TV, for example, right? YouTube TV is a, good platform. As, it has all this stuff on it. There's a place for these guys on network television. You could go and turn into your local TV station using an antenna or cable news or Dish Network. And you can find these guys have their own, oftentimes, streaming services. You can go to their website and stream their crap live, MSNBC, right? You can go to their websites. You can go to their platforms. And yet, but they're coming to these social media networks because we are, rolling them, right? Here's Brian Stelter.
The Fox propaganda network's Tucker Carlson pushing a conspiracy with no legitimate proof that the FBI organized the January 6th Capitol attack. And the claim is already being picked up by some GOP lawmakers. Attended by white nationalists. Does Tucker really take this guy seriously?
Well, in a word, yes. This is how the right-wing media world works.
See, so you got these two guys that people don't connect with because they're not real. They're disingenuous. I mean, this guy is so superficial, Don Lemons. I mean, they both are, right? And then he's complaining because they're all complaining that nobody wants to watch them and wants to watch people on social media. And they're trying to pressure these platforms to remove independent thought and people who are expressing themselves independently. And that means you suck. Like, in your personal life, did people want your opinions on things, right? Brian, were you popular in high school? I don't think Brian was popular in high school. Not that I value that. I wasn't, I'm not someone that, I'm like 10% of the people like me, right? You might be one of them. You don't have to write a comment, oh, I like you. Like, I'm not fishing for compliments. I'm just being honest. I'm not somebody that, most people like, the majority of people, which I'm completely fine with. And so my viewership is going to be smaller, right, than, other channels and other people, because I'm not somebody who tells people what they want to hear. And I'm just, I'm a required taste. Or acquired taste, one of the two. It's but still, based in my low budget and what I present here, I'm doing much better than these guys, because these guys aren't even real people. And there's so many people on social media that are better than them, who produce better content. And that's why nobody's watching them. Their ratings and their shows are dying. Most of the people that watch this type of news are in the older demographics, right? 60, 70, 80, these types of, people. And so it's dying. Their audience is literally dying, as is their whatever they do here. Whatever this is, it's dying. Like, it no longer works. It's almost impossible to sit through for any length of period of time. And they have all the advantages, right? They are the establishment. They are, the tried and true news media. They have all the backing of money. They're considered the legitimate source. They're given preference in the algorithms. They're put out there by the powers that be, the people that control the system. All of it is backing them. And with all of that backing, they're still floundering, right? They're dying. They're going extinct right in front of our eyes. So let's move over to this. This is Frank Figaliza or something like that. And this is Stephanie Rule. And this guy's going to say some stunning things over a couple of segments. He's a former FBI, he was like, I don't know, second in command or something, somebody higher up in the FBI. And this is what he had to say here. And it's, pretty damning of, well, let's just let him, bury himself here.
You need complete turnover in the intelligence professionals within the Capitol Police Department. And you need something even bigger, Stephanie, because this report again speaks out to the issue that we seem unable to see ourselves as a threat.
We are unable to see ourselves as a threat. And so he's not talking about him and his people. They're in the FBI. He's talking about right-wing people and people in the so-called truth community. That, again, I want to come back to this thing. But this is this idea that you're a threat. Every one of us is a threat to our government right now. We're a threat to our government, everybody in America. And there needs to be a change in the way that they handle law enforcement and gathering information by the FBI to compensate for this threat.
Intelligence was there, and it was, and as Ken Delaney has said, in some specificity. The report says, they knew there was access to tunnel schematics and the infrastructure of the Capitol. If that can't be seen as a viable threat, then we need to change the rules of how intelligence is gathered and how investigations can be conducted domestically.
They want to change the rules so that they can be more intrusive. They have all your social media, the information you share on social media. They have access to your phone records. They have access to everything. They're spying. We have the most complex NSA system in the world, spying system, surveillance system, but they need more, right? Because you're a threat.
And until I hear that the rules of the road have been changed for the FBI, for DHS, even for Capitol Police investigators, that they can't currently go out and feel like they can't collect information on U.S. citizens because they might infringe on free speech or freedom of...
Yeah, we got to get rid of those things because you're a threat. You got to get rid of them. Come on. Like, listen to Frank Figaliza. Yeah. Come on, bro. Like, we got to get rid of them. Come on.
Of assembly. Until we figure out how that can happen, we may see this happen again.
Wow, it's disturbing.
we are unwilling to see ourselves as a threat. That's a really important point. Garrett, what gets me...
It's a really important point, Frank Figliuzza. So he wrote a book called The FBI Way. This guy is think about that. And he said this on an earlier show.
There have been numerous court challenges. This isn't about proving the lie. It's about perpetuating the lie. There's a big difference. I look at this not through a politics lens, as you know. I look at it as a security challenge, and it's getting more and more dangerous because a cult, which is what this is akin to in terms of what Trump is doing with his base, a cult doesn't survive by proving the lie it's based on, but it simply has to perpetuate it and keep the lie alive. So what you're going to see here is this privately funded, mysterious audit being conducted essentially in the dark. We're blind to it. No one.
This is about the election audit, but he's talking about Trump as a cult, the people that follow Trump, because they don't agree with the mainstream media's narrative. I don't agree with Trump and Trumpers on so many things. I don't think Trump is a truth teller, but I think possibly he's more honest than these guys, certainly more honest and more authentic than Joe Biden. But this guy is calling that a cult, right? It is kind of a cult-like following, but so is the FBI. The FBI is a cult. Science is a cult, right? I mean, there's lots of cults out there that are, following lies and a faulty premise of reality. There's so many different ways that cults manifest themselves. And then he said this, then he goes on to say this on another broadcast.
What have we learned from our experience with international terrorism? In order to address that problem, arresting low-level operatives is merely a speed bump, not a roadblock. In order to really tackle terrorism, and this time domestically, you've got to attack and dismantle the command and control element of a terrorist group. That may mean people sitting in Congress right now.
So what I'm covering today, not purposefully, but it just worked out that way. I've been talking about all this stuff for years. This guy just made my point. This guy who's a high-ranking former FBI agent and somebody who's considered credible enough to be an expert on a mainstream media TV show has just made my point. Because I've been saying over and over again, they always go after the person in charge of the cult. He just talked about cult. Of course, he's talking about Trump, but they also talk about Q, right, as being the two leaders, cult leaders, and the leaders of these organizations that they say are a threat to America. And he just said what I always say is they go after the leader, then why haven't they gone after Q? Why haven't they arrested Q, found out who Q is? Why did they not pursue Q? Like, why aren't they even looking for Q? Why aren't any of these mainstream media organizations doing investigative journalism, trying to find out who Q is? So the most logical explanation is Q is an FBI asset because both Q and the QAnon movement and what happened on January 6th has benefited the establishment, has benefited the left-leaning media. They talk about it, right? When you're in a dispute with a loved one and you screwed up, right? Like you have a massive screw up and your loved one's manipulative and, conniving, or like your significant other or family member, they will use that, one of your friends, they will use that against you time and time again. Remember that time you did that thing to me? They'll use it as a weapon. And even though they're saying they were victimized by you or you did something to them and it hurt them, whatever it was, if they keep on bringing it up, then they actually are glad you did that thing, right? You understand this? When you're a disciplinarian and you want to impose some rules, like sometimes when you're a disciplinarian as a parent or working in, the work environment, you can see people's attitudes and things going in a way that are bad. But you really can't enforce or bring new rules in because it's a little bit slippery until something happens, somebody does a massive screw up, and then you can impose rules and use that screw up as the reason for imposing rules that need to be imposed. If you want to have a power grab, than having something happen like, what happened on January 6th or the whole QAnon movement or Trump, because Trump was their asset as well, whether he knew it or not. The left has grabbed so much power. The media and Hollywood has grabbed so much power because of all these events. None of these events have benefited you or me. Q hasn't benefited you or me. And certainly January 6th and Trump haven't benefited you or me. I mean, Trump got killed by Q and January 6th. And those are the things that killed him. You can say he's going to make a comeback or these election audits or whatever, but he was never great. Like, he didn't have any real power. They disempowered him from the beginning. He wasn't able to push through and accomplish things that he wanted. He was able to do some things, but really wasn't as powerful as a president as you've seen in recent years, because all the other powerful establishments, including the Republican Party, were working against him. They all wanted to get rid of him. And, Trump had his handlers. He had the Wall Street and the banks in Israel, and he had his people, right, that, he had to answer to as well. But if you go back and look what's happened over the past 4 years, I mean, in terms of a swing to the left having all the power, like the left has all the power right now. And there doesn't seem to be any, plan or any, counter movement to balance out the power. And I've said this before, protests don't work unless the establishment are creating the protests. And they use the protests as a way to enforce whatever they want to enforce. I said this over and over again. And so, don't get sucked into those things. If you have hatred inside of yourself, that's your hatred. Remove the hatred, right? Like, the hatred, the object of your hate is, not the hate itself. If you hate somebody, that hate is in you. The anger is in you. And these things, you got to work on that. The heartfulness meditation and the cleaning process is a way to reduce these things so you can act more rationally. But these events that have unfolded haven't helped any of us and the American people, because look at the power grab these guys are talking about. They want to look at all American people as a potential enemy, threat, and take away your rights. This FBI guy, he has written a book, The FBI Way. He wants to take away your freedom of speech and others' freedoms because he says you're a threat. And that's where the establishment is, which is supposed to serve the people, grows into something that is, a parasitic in nature, and it turns on their host, right? It becomes a cancer. These intelligence communities are a cancer. The government is a cancer. These corporations are a cancer. And now, human beings are being taken in an inhumane way where we're becoming, less and less spiritual, less and less human, and the beast is dictating the direction in which we're going. I have faith that there's a spiritual movement, a counter movement that I've experienced through the heartfulness meditation. And so for me, it sucks, but I know that there'll be at least a chance for humanity to go in the opposite direction. The choice is emerging, and people are getting fed up and have lost faith in the government and all these other institutions. Another thing that happened that was confirmation that was Tucker Carlson, which I showed that clip before where, Adam versus the Man guy, he was a YouTuber, interviewed Tucker Carlson, and Tucker Carlson said that he was, he was mocking people who believed in so-called conspiracy theories surrounding, a big event in 2001. He was mocking them and saying that was ridiculous. And then in this segment, the recent segment on January 6th, he apologized to everyone because now he knows. Like, now he's coming along. Joe Rogan's coming along because people in the mainstream can see it, right? They can see that, wow, the government has, not just the government, but the whole powerful institutions are working hard, moving everybody in a direction. And when something, when an event happens, when any event happens, you have to look at who the event benefits, and they're usually the culprit, right? The ones that are going to reap the most gain because of the benefit. And obviously we know who is benefiting from all these movements I just described. And so, you don't have to look much further. Like, I'm tired of I'm long past trying to prove or, catch the establishment or the government doing things. Those are videos I used to make, right? Because to me, it's just out there in the open. If you can't see it, you're already 2 laps behind, right? You're already, you're too far gone to ever catch up. If you can't see it by now, then, things are getting real and you gotta, it's too late anyway, right? I'm not here to wake people up, remedial people. People are coming late to the party. But it's good to see that, a lot of people are now talking about things that I've been saying here for years, other people have been saying for years in the so-called truth community. The other piece to this is the lack of trust. And, people don't trust Joe Biden and the Democrats. And, you shouldn't trust Trump either. He's not trustworthy. I'll get into that more in a video tomorrow. But it isn't about the right and the left or any of these things. It's about if you don't trust somebody like this who has done something to create the lack of trust. They've betrayed you. They've done something to you. They've cheated on you, screwed you over, whatever it is. It's their job to win the trust back. It's their job to become trustworthy again. It's not my job to fix it. It's not my job or your job, to trust them again. You understand this? And the first thing they have to do is acknowledge they've lost your trust. And they're never going to do that. These guys, the media, and, so they're just going to try to force everything else out of the way, get rid of everything else so that you don't have a choice but to listen to them. I mean, that's what the CNN and all these clowns and the politicians want to do, is make all the other political choices so sucky that it doesn't matter. All right, I'll pick this guy, right? You're picking from a sea of bad choices. Same thing with news media. They don't want independent voices that are just so much better than them, so much more conscious and alert and, have so much more compelling content, right? So, it's not our fault they suck. It's not our fault they've lost our trust. It's not our fault. Like, they keep on blaming us and they want to take more power. They want more power. They want us to purge more of our rights. We have to take your freedom of speech because we're untrustworthy and we're liars and we don't like that you're calling us on it. So we're taking your freedom of speech because you're telling us the truth about us and we can't, you're telling other people the truth about us and we can't have it. Like, that's, that's really far down the road. The other piece is there's, people are telling me it's Mercury in retrograde when I said we had so many things go wrong, including losing internet for about 5 days. The cows broke our internet wire, fiber optic. It was a whole nightmare. And then we had all these other things that were going on. I'm like, wow, this is a really bad Mercury in retrograde. It's one of the few things I know about astrology. I don't follow it and not really interested in it. I'm not really all that interested in knowing the future like most people are because, I have some sense of it. I have some, foreshadowing and whatever, some visionary type of capabilities myself, but I don't care. Like, I don't want to know the end of the movie. Like, I just, whatever. And so, not important. But in terms of this Mercury in retrograde, I often will call it, right? I'll see things happening that have to do with communication and things just going in such a horrible direction that I'm like, oh, it must be Mercury in retrograde. And I think every time I've noticed that, it has actually been Mercury in retrograde. And what I also noticed was, like, it's very easy, and this is my own experience. I was talking to my wife. She was having a similar experience at, like, just not liking people right now. Like, usually I'm a little bit more, I want to say, forgiving. Like I say all the time, I couldn't be a leader. I couldn't do the job these guys are doing. And, to be fair to our leadership, because I hammer them all the time here, the government and corporate leaders, that the American people are hard to, not the American people, human beings are very hard to work with, myself included. We're very difficult. We have a lot of issues, and some of those are caused by our system and the Kali Yuga, but some of them are caused by our own choices, our own, character flaws and things like this. And so it'd be really hard to be a leader of the people and not lie to people, because if you tell people the truth, the system would collapse and they would go, it would be like, some post-apocalyptic Mad Max, difficult, horrible situation in a short period of time. I mean, look what happened at COVID when people just raided the supermarkets and bought all the canned goods and toilet paper. People just panic. And so, and not just panic, but act in a very selfish way. And so, I'm a little bit more forgiving of the so-called controllers because I know that it isn't like they're the only ones that suck. We all suck, right? But I'm at the point now, and it has to do also with just seeing comments and, interacting with people in general and, whatever it is, my own personal frustration. Like I'll continue putting out the information, and I have a solution, the heartfulness meditation, that I believe is the solution. And many people have tried it, can see what, once you've experienced, what I'm talking about. And the more you do it, the more you can see. But, I'll keep on, doing what I'm doing here. But I'm less and less, well, let me just say it. Like, if people fail and they want to go do something bad to themselves, right, to do with COVID or whatever it might be, if they want to be Biden supporters, they want to run headlong into this thing, then, I'm not, just let it happen, right? I mean, I always say that, but even more so. Like, all right, great, you want to go do something stupid, run off the cliff, run into the, whatever it might be, right? Like, I'm not, all right, great, that's your thing, I'm not encouraging it, but, like, why do I care if you, if the population is reduced significantly, why is that a bad thing, right? If, whatever might happen here, I've done what I can do, I'm seeing this more and more that people, over the years, I had, a growing level of frustration in talking to people in my, personal life, and something, some of it to do with the heartfulness members. Something came up recently, which there was a very easy decision. It had nothing to do with me, but I knew about it. And the way that the people were behaving with all the information at their disposal and their abilities, people who are good practitioners of the heartfulness system, devoted people that have done a lot of good things and donated money and done a lot of volunteer work to make the system good. And they had an easy decision to make. And, and if you take in consideration all the teachings and the prophecies, the heartfulness meditation, it should be easy for them to see, and they're still fighting against it. And it brought up stuff, not like I, hold some grudge over bumming, but it was an unpleasant thing to go through. Cleaning, and the heartfulness meditation is cleaning. When I started to read the Whispers of the Brighter World messages, and I started to do research that, in large became a lot of the stuff I present here on this YouTube channel, and people from the system, including homesteading and, preparing myself, my family the best I could. And, when they rejected it and sort of, were shitty about it, right? Like, in a way, I was like, well, you're reading the same things I am. Why aren't you taking these things seriously? And they weren't. And, and to a certain extent, I was ostracized. And now it's becoming more apparent to them that these things are really happening. And even now, they're not like, oh, remember, like, I've had this experience where people were telling me I was wrong, and then they realize and they have their own awakening, but then they want to tell me what's going on, like they know, like they're knowers, right? Like somehow, the last 15 years I didn't get a head start on them, right? Like now that they woke up, this is what happened with QBs. This is what happens all the time. I got a comment the other day because I talked about how I saw, had this association between Joe Biden's and the kid from Deliverance. And I talked about that. I made a video about it like over maybe a year and a half ago. And I noticed that other people were, using that revelation that I had and putting it into a meme. And somebody wrote a comment that this YouTuber had talked about before me. Oh, you're just coming late to the party. And I'm like, no, that YouTuber is somebody that watches my videos, has left comments in the past, and, they stole the idea or they copied the idea from me. didn't give me credit, which I don't care about because, I'm not going to put on my resume, hey, I made the association between Jojo Magoo and the kid from Deliverance, right? Bragging about it because, of course, I always say that a lot of the stuff I present here come through the system, the heartfulness system, the intuition and the connectivity, being on the Ethernet. Sometimes there are ideas that come through me that aren't, I didn't think of, and they're just, I'm the conduit for those ideas. So whatever. Like I've long passed the idea of wanting credit, right? But then when somebody comes and says, hey, somebody else did this, long before you, oh, no, they didn't. Because I've had that experience over and over again that even when people realize they're wrong and, that I was right, they don't come and say, oh, wow, maybe I should listen to you. They come and want me to listen to them, right? Like, well, don't you think I might know a little bit more than you? I know that you've been awake for 15 minutes and all, but maybe having done this and gone through this whole thing, maybe I have a little bit more to offer than you do on this particular subject, but it is what it is. And so I've gotten to the point where if people don't want to listen, I get some enjoyment out of watching them, fail. They're thrown on the dust heap of the evolutionary process. I think more often than not, that's what I would prefer. I don't know. I mean, it's just having done this for so long, I don't have much faith in humanity. Something's going to have to change, and I think it will. But until there's things that have yet to happen, and when those things happen, then there'll be a shift. But right now, the shift hasn't happened, so it's hard for us to perceive it. And it'll go the way it's supposed to go. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.